The sun hung like a copper penny in the New Mexico sky as Willow Porter stepped off the dusty stagecoach into White Oaks. She clutched her small leather valise with white-knuckled fingers, her forest green traveling dress once fine, but now road-worn, stirring in the hot breeze that carried whispers through the bustling mining town. Even before her boot touched the dirt of the main street, she felt the stares and heard the hushed voices. That's her Porter's girl, the one from Santa Fe. Heard she? Willow raised her chin, refusing to let her gaze drop despite the burning in her cheeks. At 22, she had already endured enough judgment to last a lifetime. The year was 1882, and White Oaks was booming with the promise of gold and opportunity for some. For a woman traveling alone with a tarnished reputation, it offered only the chance to disappear. "Need help with that bag, miss?" The stagecoach driver's voice was kind, one of the few who hadn't looked at her with suspicion during the 3-day journey from Santa Fe. "No, thank you, I can manage." She offered him a grateful smile. "Could you direct me to Mrs. Holloway's boarding house?" The driver pointed down the dusty Main Street. 3 blocks down, white house with blue trim. Can't miss it. Willow nodded her thanks and started walking, her spine straight as a fence post despite the exhaustion that threatened to bend her. She'd come to White Oaks to start fresh, to escape the whispers that had followed her in Santa Fe after the scandal. Her aunt's letter had promised a position at the newly established school, a chance at respectability that Willow desperately needed. As she passed the Last Chance Saloon, the batwing doors swung open, and a burst of raucous laughter spilled onto the street along with a tall man in a worn leather vest. He steadied himself against the hitching post, then looked up, his eyes meeting hers. For a moment, everything stilled. His face was weathered by sun and wind, his jaw shadowed with stubble beneath a wide-brimmed hat. But it was his eyes that caught her steel blue and assessing, not with the usual leering interest she'd grown accustomed to deflecting, but with something more complex. A voice called from inside the saloon. "Hey, Flynn, you seen the new schoolmarm yet, Porter's girl?" The man Flynn straightened, his gaze still locked with Willow's. Here she's damaged goods. Got herself in a real situation back in Santa Fe with a married man. The voice grew louder as another cowboy emerged. "They say that's enough, Harlow." Flynn's voice cut through the air like a bullwhip, low but carrying authority. Willow froze, her heart hammering against her ribs, waiting for the inevitable smirk, the knowing look that would follow. Instead, Flynn Calloway turned to his companion, his stance shifting subtly as he stepped between the man and Willow. "You'll speak of Miss Porter with respect, or you won't speak of her at all." The silence that followed stretched taut as piano wire before the second man shrugged and retreated into the saloon. Flynn tipped his hat to Willow. "Madam." Just that single word, neither overly friendly nor dismissive, before he turned and walked toward the livery stable. Willow released the breath she'd been holding and continued toward the boarding house, wondering what kind of man would defend a woman he'd never met against rumors he likely believed were true. Mrs. Holloway's boarding house was exactly as described, a tidy 2-story white clapboard with blue trim and a wide porch. The proprietress herself opened the door before Willow had a chance to knock, a plump, stern-faced woman with graying hair pulled back in a tight bun. "Miss Porter, I presume." Her tone was neither welcoming nor hostile, merely practical. "You're right on time. I keep a respectable house here." "Yes, madam, I appreciate you taking me in." Mrs. Holloway's shrewd eyes took in Willow's appearance. "Your aunt speaks highly of you, says you've had proper schooling back east." "Yes, madam. 4 years at the women's seminary in Boston before." Willow stopped, unsure how much the woman knew of her circumstances. "Before returning to Santa Fe." "Yes, I know." Mrs. Holloway stepped aside. "Your room is upstairs, last door on the left, supper's at 6 sharp. The school board meets tomorrow morning to finalize your position. I suggest you rest today and prepare yourself." "Thank you." Willow stepped into the cool dimness of the house, grateful for the woman's businesslike manner. "And Miss Porter," Willow turned, her heart sinking at the familiar tone. This is a small town. People talk. But I judge folks on what I see, not what I hear. You do your job well and you'll find White Oaks can be forgiving. With that unexpected kindness, Mrs. Holloway led her upstairs to a small but clean room with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a window overlooking the bustling Main Street. Once alone, Willow sank onto the bed, exhaustion finally claiming her. She woke hours later to the sound of Mrs. Holloway's dinner bell. After splashing water on her face and changing into her one good dress, a navy blue with modest lace at the collar, she descended to find 4 other boarders already seated at the long dining table. Mrs. Holloway made brisk introductions. Mr. Phelps, the aging telegraph operator, Miss Winters, the milliner, Mr. and Mrs. Carson, who ran the general store. They greeted her politely enough, though their eyes held curiosity. Conversation flowed around her as she ate the hearty beef stew and fresh bread. She answered questions about her teaching experience with careful composure, and when Mr. Phelps inquired about her family in Santa Fe, she managed a brief explanation about her parents' passing and her aunt's position as housekeeper to Judge Williams. No one mentioned any rumors, though Willow felt the unasked questions hovering. As dinner concluded, Mrs. Holloway announced, "Miss Porter will be taking over the schoolhouse, pending tomorrow's formality with the board." "About time the children had proper schooling again," Mrs. Carson remarked. "Since Mr. Abernathy left last spring, they've been running wild." "You'll have your work cut out for you," Mr. Phelps added. "Some of those mining families' boys haven't seen the inside of a schoolhouse in months." "I look forward to the challenge," Willow said with more confidence than she felt. After helping clear the dishes, Willow excused herself to prepare for the next day. Back in her room, she laid out her teaching credentials and the curriculum notes she'd meticulously prepared during the journey. Tomorrow would determine whether White Oaks would be her fresh start or another doorway closed against her. Morning brought clear skies and a knot of anxiety in Willow's stomach as she made her way to the town hall. The school board consisted of 5 stern-faced men who questioned her thoroughly about her education, teaching methods, and moral character. She answered steadily, meeting their eyes despite the discomfort when one elderly gentleman inquired why she had left her position in Santa Fe. "Family circumstances required a change," she replied evenly, the half-truth bitter on her tongue. Just as the questioning seemed to be winding down, the door opened and Flynn Calloway stepped in, removing his hat as he entered. "Apologies for my tardiness, gentlemen." His voice carried the same quiet authority she'd noted the day before. The board chairman nodded. "Mr. Calloway, we were just concluding our interview with Miss Porter." Willow struggled to mask her surprise. This cowboy was on the school board. Flynn took a seat at the end of the table, those steel blue eyes briefly meeting hers. "I've heard Miss Porter comes highly recommended by Judge Williams of Santa Fe." The mention of the judge, her aunt's employer, and the husband of the woman whose affair with Willow's former fiancé had sparked the scandal sent a jolt through her. "How much did this man know?" "That's correct," she managed. The chairman cleared his throat. "Well, unless Mr. Calloway has additional questions. Just one." Flynn leaned forward slightly. "Miss Porter, our town has children from all walks of life, miners' kids, ranchers' children, some who have had no schooling at all. Some speak Spanish better than English. Will that be a problem?" The question surprised her. "No, sir. Education should be accessible to all children, regardless of background, and I speak Spanish fluently, having grown up in the territory." Something that might have been approval flickered across his face before he nodded and leaned back. 10 minutes later, Willow emerged from the town hall as White Oaks' new schoolteacher, employed to begin the following Monday. Relief coursed through her as she stepped into the sunshine. 4 days to prepare the schoolhouse and organize her lessons. Miss Porter. She turned to find Flynn Calloway following her out, hat in hand. "Mr. Calloway, I didn't realize you served on the school board." A slight smile curved his mouth beneath his mustache. Town needed someone to represent the ranching interests. I got volunteered. He fell into step beside her, and she noticed he deliberately placed himself between her and the street, a gentlemanly gesture that seemed at odds with his rugged appearance. I wanted to apologize for Harlow's behavior yesterday. He's got more whiskey than sense most days. There's no need to apologize. I'm accustomed to such talk. His expression hardened slightly. You shouldn't have to be. They walked in silence for a moment before he spoke again. The schoolhouse hasn't been used in months, likely needs some work before you start teaching. I was planning to assess it this afternoon. I'll round up some help, can have it ready by tomorrow. Willow stopped walking. That's very kind, but I wouldn't want to impose. Flynn looked down at her, and for the first time she noticed the small scar that cut through his left eyebrow. Education matters in a place like this, Miss Porter. These kids deserve a proper start. Before she could respond, a young boy came running up to them, breathless with excitement. Mr. Flynn, Pa said to tell you the new horses arrived at the ranch. Flynn ruffled the boy's hair. Thanks, Tommy. Tell your pa I'll be out directly. As the boy ran off, Flynn turned back to Willow. That's Tommy Miller. He'll be in your school, smart as a whip but hasn't had much chance to learn his letters. You seem to know the children well. Small town, he shrugged. I'll have some men at the schoolhouse tomorrow morning if that suits. Willow found herself nodding. Yes, thank you. With a tip of his hat, he was gone, striding toward the livery with long, purposeful steps. Willow watched him go, puzzled by the man who had defended her honor before ever meeting her, who served on a school board despite looking every inch the rugged cowboy, and who spoke of education with unexpected passion. The schoolhouse sat on the edge of town, a single-room building with peeling white paint and a sagging porch. Inside, Willow found dust, cobwebs, and furniture in disarray. The blackboard was cracked, half the desks were missing slats, and a family of mice had taken up residence in the teacher's desk. She spent the afternoon taking inventory and making lists, her spirits alternately rising with possibilities and sinking at the magnitude of the task. By the time she returned to the boarding house, her hands were grimy, and her hair had escaped its pins, but she had a clear plan for restoration. The next morning, true to his word, Flynn arrived at the schoolhouse with 4 men, 2 young cowboys from his ranch, and 2 miners who introduced themselves as fathers of school-age children. They set to work immediately, repairing furniture, patching the roof, and cleaning out the old stove. Willow worked alongside them, scrubbing floors and washing windows. When she climbed onto a wobbly chair to reach the top of the blackboard, a strong hand steadied her elbow. "Allow me." Flynn took the cloth from her hand, his height making easy work of the task. Throughout the day, she caught glimpses of another side of him. He spoke Spanish with one of the miners, discussed cattle prices with his ranch hands, and demonstrated unexpected skill in repairing the broken desks. By mid-afternoon, the schoolhouse had been transformed. As the others packed up their tools, Flynn lingered, examining the small collection of books Willow had arranged on a shelf. Not much of a library, she acknowledged, coming to stand beside him. Better than nothing. He picked up a worn copy of Robinson Crusoe. This was the first real book I ever read. My mother insisted on education even after we moved west. You weren't born here, Missouri originally. Came to the territory after the war. My father fought for the Union, never quite recovered. He returned the book to the shelf. What brought you to White Oaks, Miss Porter? Really, the directness of his question startled her. I needed a fresh start, she admitted. Because of whatever they're whispering about in the saloons, heat rushed to her face. You don't mince words, Mr. Calloway. Not much point to it. His gaze was steady, not judging but waiting. Willow turned away, running her fingers along the newly repaired desk. I was engaged to be married in Santa Fe. My fiancé, she swallowed hard. He was involved with a married woman. When it was discovered, he claimed I had enticed him first. That I had been improper, and the town believed him. He comes from an influential family. I'm just the orphaned niece of a housekeeper. She straightened her shoulders. I didn't do what he claimed, but in the end it hardly mattered. My reputation was ruined. Flynn was silent for so long that she finally looked back at him, expecting to see doubt. Instead, his expression held a controlled anger that surprised her. Men like that should be horsewhipped, he said quietly. It doesn't matter now, I've left it behind me. Has it left you behind, though? His perception unsettled her. Before she could answer, one of his ranch hands called from outside and the moment passed. Flynn excused himself, promising to send more books for the schoolhouse when he could. That night, Willow lay awake, thinking about the day's work and the unexpected help from Flynn Calloway. She couldn't reconcile the rough-edged rancher with the man who quoted Shakespeare under his breath, while fixing a window latch and spoke passionately about the importance of education. There was a story there, one she found herself increasingly curious to know. The weekend passed in a flurry of preparation. Several women from town, including Mrs. Carson, visited the schoolhouse, bringing donations of chalk, paper, and a beautiful handmade American flag. News of Monday's school opening spread, and by Sunday evening, Willow had a list of 28 children expected to attend. Monday dawned bright and clear. Willow arrived at the schoolhouse an hour early, arranging everything meticulously. Her hands trembled slightly as she wrote the day's lessons on the blackboard. So much depended on making a good impression on the children, on their parents, on the town that was already whispering about her past. The first students began arriving at 8 o'clock. They came in all sizes and states of preparation, some scrubbed clean with slicked-down hair, others bearing the dirt of mining camps or ranch work. Some carried lunch pails and brand-new slates, others came empty-handed, eyes wide with uncertainty. Willow greeted each one with a warm smile, learning names and assessing rating levels. By 9 o'clock, 25 children occupied the desks, ranging from 6-year-old Sally Jenkins to 16-year-old Miguel Ortiz, who explained in halting English that he wanted to learn enough to help with his father's store accounts. Just as Willow prepared to ring the bell to officially start the school day, the door opened once more. Flynn Calloway stepped in, followed by a thin, solemn-faced boy of about 10. "Miss Porter," Flynn said, removing his hat. "This is Daniel Morgan. His father works at my ranch. He's shy but smart as they come." The boy stared at the floor, clutching a battered reader to his chest. Willow approached them, crouching slightly to meet the boy's eyes. "Hello, Daniel. I'm very pleased to meet you." The boy mumbled something inaudible, then darted to an empty desk in the back row. Flynn watched him go, concern evident in his expression. "His mother died last winter. Been having a hard time of it. I'll keep an eye on him," Willow promised. Flynn nodded, then cleared his throat. "Almost forgot. These are for your library." He handed her a package wrapped in brown paper. Inside, Willow found 3 books, a collection of Emerson's essays, a volume of Tennyson's poetry, and a near-new copy of Little Women. "Mr. Calloway, these are lovely, but I couldn't possibly. They were my mother's," he said simply. "They should be read, not sitting on a shelf gathering dust." He glanced around the classroom. "I'll leave you to it. Good luck, Miss Porter." With that, he was gone, leaving Willow holding the books against her chest, aware of 26 pairs of curious eyes watching her. That first day tested everything Willow had learned about teaching. The students' abilities varied wildly. Some could barely recognize letters. Others were ready for advanced mathematics. She divided them into groups, setting the older students to help the younger ones while she moved between them. Daniel Morgan sat silently through most of the morning, responding only when directly addressed. But when Willow asked the class who could read aloud a passage from their readers, his hand slowly raised. His clear, articulate reading of a complex paragraph about westward expansion surprised her and earned him newfound respect from his classmates. By the end of the day, Willow was exhausted but exhilarated. The children had responded to her patience and enthusiasm, and even the most reluctant learners had made progress. As they filed out, several parents waited in the yard, eager to meet the new teacher. Their reception was cautiously warm, their gratitude evident as children excitedly shared what they'd learned. "Miss Porter," Daniel lingered after the others had gone. "Mr. Flynn said to tell you he'll come by tomorrow to fix that loose board on the steps. That's very thoughtful of him." The boy nodded solemnly. "He's the best man I know. He gave Pa work when nobody else would, on account of Pa's leg from the war, and he teaches me things about horses and reading and such." "You read beautifully, Daniel. Mr. Calloway must be a good teacher." A hint of a smile crossed the boy's face. "He says learning's the only thing nobody can ever take from you." With that, he hurried away, calling goodbye over his shoulder. Willow watched him go, adding this new piece to her growing puzzle of Flynn Calloway. A rancher who valued education, who carried poetry in his saddlebags, who defended a woman's honor on principle he defied every expectation. True to Daniel's message, Flynn appeared the next morning before school, tools in hand. Willow found him kneeling on the porch steps, replacing not just one loose board but several. "You don't have to do this," she said, setting down her basket of supplies. "School needs to be safe." He hammered in another nail with practiced efficiency. "How'd the first day go?" "Better than I could have hoped," she smiled. "Daniel has a remarkable mind," Flynn nodded, pride evident in his expression. "Boy's been through a lot, lost his mother, then had to watch his father struggle. Reading gave him somewhere to escape to. You seem to understand that well." He looked up at her, squinting against the morning sun. "Books kept me sane during the war. Found a copy of the Iliad in an abandoned farmhouse, read it cover to cover 3 times before we moved on." "You fought in the war," the question slipped out before she could stop it. "Union cavalry." "Enlisted at 17, served till Appomattox." He stood, dusting off his hands. "Not something I talk about much. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have pried." "It's not prying when it's offered." He gathered his tools. "Board's secure now." As he turned to leave, Willow impulsively said, "Mr. Calloway, I never properly thanked you for your help with the schoolhouse and for the books." "Flynn." When she looked confused, he added, "My friends call me Flynn, not Mr. Calloway." "Then I'm Willow, not Miss Porter." The informality felt both improper and right. Something shifted in his eyes, a warmth that hadn't been there before. "Willow, then, and you're welcome." The moment lengthened between them until the sound of approaching children broke the spell. Flynn tipped his hat and departed as the first students arrived. Over the following weeks, a pattern emerged. Flynn would appear every few days, always with some small repair to make or book to deliver. They would talk briefly about the students, about White Oaks, about books they had both read. Never about Santa Fe or the rumors that still occasionally reached Willow's ears. Those rumors had not disappeared entirely. Mrs. Holloway reported overhearing conversations at the general store, speculation about what exactly Miss Porter had done to be sent away from Santa Fe. But alongside the gossip came growing respect as parents noted their children's progress and enthusiasm for learning. One Friday afternoon in early October, Willow dismissed her students early so she could prepare for the following week's geography lessons. She was drawing a careful map of the United States on the blackboard when the door opened and Flynn entered, carrying a large rolled paper. Thought this might help. He unrolled a proper wall map, the colors still bright and clear. "Ordered it from Denver." Willow stared in amazement. "This must have cost. It's an investment in the town's future." He shrugged off her gratitude, his eyes moving to her half-completed chalk drawing. "Though your artwork is mighty fine." "Hardly that," she laughed, wiping chalk dust from her hands. "But thank you for the map. The children will be thrilled." He helped her hang it on the wall, their hands occasionally brushing as they positioned the heavy paper. Each touch sent a current through her that she tried desperately to ignore. "Some of the ranchers are organizing a harvest dance next Saturday," Flynn said as they finished. "Thought you might like to know." Willow smoothed the edge of the map. "I heard Mrs. Carson mention it. Will you attend?" The question hung in the air between them. Willow hesitated. "I'm not sure I'd be welcome." Flynn's jaw tightened. "Anyone says otherwise will answer to me. And that's precisely why I shouldn't go." She stepped back from the map. I can't have you fighting my battles, Flynn. It only feeds the gossip. So you'll hide away instead, let them win. His bluntness both stung and invigorated her. It's not about winning, it's about building a new life here. I'm just beginning to earn the town's trust as a teacher. Flynn watched her for a long moment. Sometimes trust is earned by standing your ground, not by disappearing. Before she could form a response, he changed the subject. Daniel tells me you're teaching the older children about government, says you had them form a mock Congress. She accepted the shift gratefully. Yes, they're debating a bill about school funding. Miguel Ortiz makes a very persuasive senator. They talked about the school for a while longer before Flynn departed, but his question about the dance lingered in Willow's thoughts for days afterward. The harvest dance would be held in the newly constructed community hall, the first major social event since its completion. All week, her students chattered excitedly about the music, the decorations, the special clothes they would wear. Even Mrs. Holloway seemed animated as she described the preparations. You really should attend, Miss Porter, the landlady said at breakfast the day before the dance. Show the town you're one of us now. Willow stirred her tea. Perhaps. Mrs. Holloway gave her a knowing look. Mr. Calloway asks about you, you know, when he comes to town council meetings. Heat crept up Willow's neck. He's been very supportive of the school. The older woman's expression remained neutral, but her eyes held a spark of amusement. That blue dress of yours would be perfect for a dance. By Saturday evening, Willow had made her decision. She stood before the small mirror in her room, smoothing the skirt of her best dress, the deep blue that Mrs. Holloway had mentioned, with delicate embroidery at the collar and cuffs. She had pinned her hair up in a simple but elegant style, allowing a few honey-brown curls to frame her face. The walk to the community hall took only 10 minutes, but with each step, Willow's resolve wavered. She could hear the music and laughter before she saw the building, lanterns illuminating the path and casting a warm glow through the windows. Couples and families streamed inside, the women in their finest dresses, the men awkward but proud in cleaned and pressed shirts. Willow paused at the entrance, gathering her courage. Before she could step inside, a familiar voice called her name. Flynn stood a few yards away, looking so different that she almost didn't recognize him. Gone were the worn work clothes and dust-covered boots. Instead, he wore a dark suit with a crisp white shirt and string tie. His hair was neatly combed, his face freshly shaved except for his well-trimmed mustache. Only his hat remained the same, the wide-brimmed Stetson that had shaded his eyes that first day in White Oaks. "You came," he said, the simple words carrying a weight of approval that warmed her. "I decided you were right. Hiding solves nothing." He offered his arm. "May I escort you in, Miss Porter?" The formal gesture made her smile. "You may, Mr. Calloway." Conversation faltered briefly as they entered together, heads turning as the town took note of the new schoolteacher on the arm of one of White Oak's most respected ranchers. Then the music swelled again, and the moment passed. Flynn introduced her to people she hadn't yet met: the banker's wife, the young doctor recently arrived from Chicago, several ranchers and their families. To her surprise, they welcomed her warmly, many praising her work at the school or sharing stories of their children's newfound enthusiasm for learning. "See," Flynn murmured as they moved away from a particularly effusive mining engineer whose daughter had finally mastered long division. "The town's forming its own opinion of you. Thanks to you." He shook his head. "No, Willow, thanks to your own hard work and character." Before she could respond, the music changed to a lively reel and Flynn's eyes lit with challenge. "Do you dance, Miss Porter?" "I haven't in quite some time." "Then it's high time you remembered how." He led her onto the floor where other couples were already forming lines. The dance was fast-paced and joyful, requiring concentration that left no room for self-consciousness. Willow found herself laughing as Flynn guided her through the steps with unexpected grace. His hand at her waist was strong and sure, his eyes bright with pleasure as they moved together. When the music finally ended, both were breathless. Flynn led her to a quiet corner where refreshments were being served, fetching them both cups of punch. "You dance well for a cowboy," Willow teased, fanning herself with her hand. "My mother insisted on lessons. Said no son of hers would stomp around a dance floor like a bear with a thorn in his paw." His smile held a touch of sadness. "She was a Boston girl, married my father against her family's wishes, followed him west but never quite let go of her Eastern standards. She sounds remarkable. She was." He looked out at the dancers, his expression distant. "Died when I was 16, influenza." "I'm sorry," Willow touched his arm briefly. "My parents died in a flash flood when I was 12. My aunt took me in." Flynn's gaze returned to her face. "Loss shapes us, makes us who we are." "Yes," she agreed softly. "Though sometimes I wonder who I might have been without it." A slower tune began, and Flynn set down his cup. "Would you honor me with another dance?" This time the steps brought them closer together. Flynn's hand at her waist felt warmer, more intimate. The scent of his soap and leather and something uniquely his own surrounded her as they moved in perfect harmony. "People are watching," she murmured, aware of curious eyes following their progress. "Let them watch." His voice was low near her ear. "Let them see that I'm dancing with the most intelligent, courageous woman in the territory." Willow's heart stuttered. "Flynn, I've been wanting to ask you something," he continued, guiding her through a turn. "Would you allow me to call on you properly, Sunday afternoons, perhaps?" The question was so unexpected, so wonderfully formal and correct that Willow missed a step. Flynn steadied her smoothly, his eyes questioning. "You want to court me?" she asked, disbelief coloring her words. "Yes, madam, I do." His directness was as appealing as always, "unless you object." "But the rumors don't interest me in the slightest." His grip tightened slightly. "I know who you are, Willow. I've seen it in how you teach the children, how you treat everyone with respect regardless of their station, how you face down adversity with dignity. That's the woman I want to court." The music was ending, but they continued to sway together for a moment longer. "Yes," Willow said finally. "I would like that very much." The smile that spread across his face transformed him, erasing the lines of hard experience and revealing the man beneath the weathered exterior. It was a smile she would come to treasure in the months ahead. True to his word, Flynn began calling on Willow every Sunday afternoon. Sometimes they would walk through town or along the creek that ran behind the schoolhouse. Other times, they would sit on Mrs. Holloway's porch, talking for hours about books, about their pasts, about their hopes for White Oaks. Willow learned that Flynn had come to New Mexico after the war, unable to return to a Missouri home too full of memories. He had worked as a ranch hand, a scout, even briefly as a lawman before saving enough to purchase a small ranch that he had steadily expanded over the years. Now, the Circle C was one of the most successful operations in the county. Flynn, in turn, learned about Willow's childhood in Santa Fe, her years at the seminary in Boston, her dreams of someday establishing a proper academy in the West, where girls could receive education equal to that of boys. He listened with genuine interest, offering encouragement and practical suggestions that showed he took her ambitions seriously. As autumn deepened into winter, their courtship became an accepted fact in White Oaks. The whispers about Willow's past gradually faded, replaced by appreciation for the dedicated teacher who had transformed the schoolhouse into a center of learning and community. Daniel Morgan, in particular, thrived under Willow's guidance. His initial shyness gave way to eager participation, especially when Flynn occasionally visited the school to tell the children about ranching or the early days of the territory. Watching the two of them together, the solemn boy and the man who had taken him under his wing, Willow felt her heart expand with affection for both. One crisp December afternoon, Flynn invited Willow to visit his ranch. Mrs. Holloway, ever mindful of propriety, insisted that Daniel accompany them as a chaperone, an arrangement that delighted the boy and amused Flynn. The Circle C sprawled across a valley 15 miles outside town, The main house, a substantial two-story structure built of timber and stone. Corrals, barns, and bunkhouses formed a neat compound with cattle grazing on the surrounding hills. "It's beautiful," Willow said as Flynn helped her down from the wagon. "It's home." He looked around with quiet pride. "Come, I'll show you around." The tour revealed a well-run operation with 20 ranch hands, hundreds of cattle, and some of the finest horses Willow had ever seen. Daniel ran ahead to visit his father, who worked in the stables despite his injured leg. Finally, Flynn led her to the main house. Inside, Willow found a surprising blend of frontier practicality and unexpected refinement. The furniture was solid and well-crafted, the walls adorned with a few good paintings. A large bookcase dominated one wall of the main room, filled with volumes that reflected Flynn's eclectic interests. "Your mother's influence?" Willow asked, running her fingers along the spines of books ranging from Greek philosophy to modern novels. "Partly. The rest is my own restless mind." He moved to stand beside her. "I never had much formal schooling, but I've always been hungry for knowledge." "A self-made scholar," he laughed. "Hardly that. Just a man who knows there's always more to learn." In the kitchen, Flynn surprised her by preparing coffee and producing a plate of cookies that he admitted were baked by his housekeeper, Mrs. Gonzalez, who came in 3 times a week. "I live simply when she's not here," he admitted. "Too many years of campfire cooking." They sat by the fireplace, talking comfortably while waiting for Daniel to return from the stables. When Flynn excused himself briefly to fetch more firewood, Willow wandered to his desk, drawn by a framed photograph. It showed a younger Flynn in Union cavalry uniform, standing beside a seated older man in an officer's coat. The family resemblance was unmistakable in the set of their jaws and the shape of their eyes. "My father," Flynn said from the doorway, arms full of split logs. "Captain Thomas Calloway, that was taken just before Gettysburg. You look like him." Had his sense of justice, too. "Maybe too much of it." He set the wood down with a sigh. "He died believing the war would bring lasting change. Sometimes I wonder what he'd think of how things turned out." "He'd be proud of you," Willow said with certainty. "Of the man you've become." Flynn's expression softened as he looked at her. "Willow, there's something I want to." The door burst open as Daniel returned, cheeks red with cold, eyes bright with excitement as he launched into a detailed account of the new foal in the stable. The moment passed, but Willow caught Flynn watching her throughout the evening with an intensity that made her heart race. As Christmas approached, White Oaks embraced the holiday spirit. The school held a pageant that brought the entire town together, with children performing songs and recitations they had practiced for weeks. Even the weather cooperated, bringing a light snowfall that transformed the mining town into a scene from a Christmas card. On Christmas Eve, Flynn escorted Willow to the community church service. As they walked home afterward through the gently falling snow, he seemed unusually quiet. "Is something wrong?" Willow asked, her breath forming clouds in the cold air. Flynn stopped walking, turning to face her under the glow of a street lamp. "I've been trying to find the right moment, the right words." He took her gloved hands in his. "But I'm not a man given to flowery speeches." Willow's heart began to pound as he reached into his coat pocket. "My life changed the day you stepped off that stagecoach," he said, his voice deep and steady. "You brought something to White Oaks that was missing, not just learning for the children, but a kind of grace and courage that humbles me." From his pocket, he withdrew a small velvet box. "I love you, Willow Porter. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Inside the box lay a ring not ostentatious but perfectly suited to her. A single sapphire surrounded by tiny diamonds in a silver setting that caught and held the lamplight. "It was my mother's," Flynn explained, watching her face anxiously. "If you'd prefer something newer, it's beautiful," Willow whispered, tears filling her eyes. "And yes, Flynn Calloway, yes, I will marry you." His face transformed with joy as he slipped the ring onto her finger, then drew her into his arms. Their kiss was tender at first, then deepened with a passion that had been building between them for months. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless, their expressions mirroring the same wonder and desire. "I should get you home before Mrs. Holloway sends out a search party," Flynn said reluctantly. Willow laughed, feeling lighter than she had in years. "She'll be waiting up, ready to inspect the ring and demand all the details." They walked back to the boarding house hand in hand, stopping frequently to exchange kisses in the shadows between street lamps. At the door, Flynn held her close for one last embrace. "Merry Christmas, Willow." "Merry Christmas, my love." News of their engagement spread quickly through White Oaks. The reaction was overwhelmingly positive, with congratulations coming from all quarters. Even those who had once whispered about Willow's past now spoke admiringly of the match. Mrs. Holloway, in particular, took credit for having foreseen the outcome from the beginning. "Knew it the moment he defended you outside that saloon," she declared smugly. "A man doesn't stand up like that unless his heart's already engaged." The spring wedding was to be held in the community church, with a celebration afterward at the Circle C. Preparations consumed much of Willow's free time, though she insisted on maintaining her teaching schedule without interruption. "The children's education can't wait," she told Flynn when he suggested she might want to reduce her hours. He smiled at that. "Wouldn't have you any other way." As the wedding day approached, Willow's aunt arrived from Santa Fe, bringing with her a trunk containing Willow's mother's wedding dress, and a letter from Judge Williams offering his heartfelt congratulations. The judge's wife had finally admitted her role in the scandal, clearing Willow's name in Santa Fe society, though the vindication came too late to matter much to Willow. She had found her home and her future in White Oaks. The day before the wedding, as Willow was closing up the schoolhouse for the weekend, an unexpected visitor arrived. A well-dressed man in his 30s stepped through the door, removing his hat as he entered. It took Willow a moment to recognize him. Edward Blackburn, her former fiancé from Santa Fe. She froze, her hand clutching the edge of her desk. "Edward, what are you doing here?" He looked older, somehow diminished from the confident, handsome man she had once thought she loved. "I came to see you, Willow, to explain, to apologize. You're several months too late for that." She was surprised by the steadiness of her voice, by the absence of the hurt and anger that had once consumed her. "I know." He moved further into the room, his eyes taking in the orderly classroom. "I heard you were getting married, a rancher, they say." "Yes, tomorrow." Edward nodded slowly. "Are you happy, Willow?" The question seemed genuine, prompting her to answer honestly. "Happier than I ever imagined possible." "Good." He looked down at his hat, turning it in his hands. "I behaved abominably. What I did to you, there's no excuse." "No, there isn't." Willow gathered her books, preparing to leave. "But it's in the past now." "Can you ever forgive me?" She considered the question seriously. "I already have, Edward, not for your sake, but for mine." Carrying that anger and hurt, it was too heavy a burden. He seemed surprised by her response. "You've changed." "Yes." She moved toward the door, pausing beside him. "I should thank you in a way. If you hadn't betrayed me, I would never have come to White Oaks, never have found my true purpose. Never have met Flynn." The door opened before Edward could respond. Flynn stood there, his expression darkening as he took in the scene. "Willow?" His voice held a question. "Flynn, this is Edward Blackburn from Santa Fe. Edward, my fiancé, Flynn Calloway." Understanding flashed in Flynn's eyes, followed by a cold anger as he sized up the man who had caused Willow so much pain. For a tense moment, Willow feared what might happen. Then Flynn did something unexpected. He stepped forward and extended his hand. "Mr. Blackburn." "You've had a long journey." Edward hesitated, then shook the offered hand. "Mr. Calloway, I was just congratulating Willow on her happiness." "Were you now?" Flynn's tone was neutral, but his eyes remained hard. "Well, she deserves every happiness. Which is why I'll be spending the rest of my life making sure she has it." The possessive arm he slipped around Willow's waist was not subtle, nor was it meant to be. Edward took the hint, replacing his hat and moving toward the door. "I wish you both well," he said, and despite everything, Willow believed he meant it. "Goodbye, Willow." After he had gone, Flynn turned to her. "Are you all right?" "Yes," she leaned into his embrace. "Better than all right. Did you mean what you said about forgiving him?" Willow nodded against his chest. "Not forgetting, but forgiving. There's a difference." Flynn's arms tightened around her. "You continually amaze me, Willow Porter." "Tomorrow it will be Willow Calloway," she reminded him with a smile. His kiss was possessive and tender all at once. "The longest 24 hours of my life." The wedding day dawned clear and perfect, the New Mexico sky a brilliant blue above white oaks. The small church overflowed with well-wishers as Willow walked down the aisle on the arm of Mr. Phelps, who had offered to give her away. Her mother's dress had been carefully altered to fit her, the ivory satin and lace catching the light that streamed through the stained glass windows. Flynn waited at the altar, his expression one of reverent awe as he watched her approach. Beside him stood his foreman as best man, while Mrs. Holloway served as Willow's matron of honor. In the front pew, Daniel Morgan sat with his father, the boy's face solemn with the importance of the occasion. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt. When they exchanged vows, Flynn's voice rang clear and strong throughout the church. Willow's response was equally firm, her eyes never leaving his as she promised to love, honor, and cherish. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the minister declared. "You may kiss your bride." Flynn needed no further invitation. His kiss was both respectful of their surroundings and filled with promise for later, drawing appreciative applause from the congregation. The celebration at the Circle C lasted well into the evening. Tables groaned with food prepared by women from town and the ranch. A band played while couples danced in the cleared barn. Children ran and played games organized by older students from Willow's school. As sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and purple, Flynn led Willow away from the festivities to a quiet spot overlooking the valley. "Happy, Mrs. Calloway?" he asked, his arms encircling her from behind, completely. She leaned back against his chest. "It's still hard to believe sometimes how much my life has changed in less than a year. For the better, I hope." There was a hint of uncertainty in his voice that touched her. Willow turned in his arms. "For the infinitely better. You saw me when others only saw rumors and scandal. You defended me before you even knew me. I knew enough." His hand cupped her cheek. "I knew you had courage and dignity. The rest I learned day by day, your kindness, your intelligence, your passion for teaching. And each day I fell more in love with you." As the stars began to appear overhead, they returned to their guests. Later, amid cheerful teasing and well wishes, they departed for their wedding night in the main house, now truly Willow's home as well as Flynn's. In the privacy of their bedroom, nervousness momentarily overcame Willow. Flynn sensed her tension and moved slowly, with infinite tenderness. His hands and lips explored her with reverence, awakening sensations she had never imagined. When they finally joined as husband and wife, the physical union was as perfect as the emotional one they had built over months of courtship. Afterward, lying in his arms with her head on his chest, Willow felt a sense of completeness, of having found her place in the world. "What are you thinking?" Flynn's voice was drowsy, content. "That I'm exactly where I'm meant to be." She pressed a kiss to his shoulder. "With you." The months that followed were busy ones. Willow continued teaching while also settling into her role as Mrs. Calloway and mistress of the Circle C. Flynn supported her work at the school, even helping to expand the building to accommodate more students as White Oaks continued to grow. By their first anniversary, Willow had news to share. On a warm spring evening, she waited until they were alone on the porch after dinner. "Flynn, I have something to tell you." She took his hand, placing it gently on her still flat stomach. "We're going to have a baby." Joy transformed his face as the meaning of her words sank in. "A baby, you're sure?" The doctor confirmed it yesterday. "He thinks sometime in November." Flynn pulled her into his lap, holding her as if she were made of the most precious porcelain. "A child," he whispered against her hair. "Our child." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, though Willow insisted on continuing to teach until the beginning of her 8th month. When she finally agreed to take time away from the school, the town rallied around her. Mrs. Holloway temporarily came out of retirement to substitute, while the women of White Oaks showered Willow with advice, remedies, and handmade baby clothes. On a snowy November night, after 18 hours of labor, Willow gave birth to a healthy son. Flynn, who had paced anxiously outside the bedroom throughout her labor, rushed in at the midwife's call to find his wife tired but radiant, a small bundle cradled in her arms. "Come meet your son," Willow said softly. Flynn approached with uncharacteristic hesitation, sitting carefully beside her on the bed. When she placed the baby in his arms, his expression of wonder and love brought tears to Willow's eyes. "He's perfect," Flynn whispered, gently touching the infant's tiny fingers. "What shall we name him?" They had discussed names but hadn't settled on one. Now, looking at the child's serious gaze so like his father's, Willow knew. "Thomas," she suggested, "after your father." Flynn's eyes met hers, gratitude and love shining in their depths. "Thomas Porter Calloway." Little Thomas thrived, growing into a curious, active toddler with his father's determined jaw and his mother's warm brown eyes. When he was 18 months old, Willow returned to teaching part-time, bringing him with her to the schoolhouse where he became the unofficial mascot of the school. By then, White Oaks had grown considerably. The gold mines were producing well, bringing prosperity and new residents. Flynn's ranch expanded accordingly, supplying beef to the growing town and to markets as far away as Santa Fe. The Calloways became known not just for their successful businesses, but for their commitment to the community. Flynn serving on various town councils, while Willow continued her work in education. When Thomas was 3, Willow approached Flynn with an idea that had been forming in her mind for months. "I want to establish a proper academy," she explained as they sat by the fire after putting their son to bed. "Not just the primary school we have now, but a place where older students can continue their education, especially girls who otherwise might have no opportunity for advanced learning." Flynn listened attentively as she outlined her vision: a school that would teach not only traditional subjects, but also practical skills needed in the West, from accounting to land management. "We'd need a new building," he mused when she finished, "and qualified teachers. Yes, and funding for scholarships for students who can't afford tuition." Willow had clearly thought it through. "It's ambitious, I know, but it's brilliant." Flynn leaned forward to take her hands. "This territory needs exactly what you're proposing. And you're exactly the woman to make it happen." His immediate support, his belief in her vision without question or hesitation, reminded Willow once again why she loved him so deeply. Over the following year, they worked together to make her dream a reality. Flynn provided land at the edge of town and initial funding, while Willow developed the curriculum and recruited teachers from as far away as Boston. The White Oaks Academy opened its doors in the fall of 1888, with 15 students ranging in age from 14 to 19. Daniel Morgan, now a serious young man of 16 with a gift for mathematics, was among the first students, having earned a scholarship through his academic excellence at the primary school. That same year brought another blessing to the Calloway household with the birth of a daughter, Eleanor, named after Flynn's mother. With 2 children and the new academy demanding her attention, Willow sometimes felt overwhelmed, but Flynn was an equal partner in both parenting and supporting her professional ambitions. "You're changing the future of this territory," he told her one evening as they walked through the nearly completed academy building. "These students will carry your influence forward in ways we can't even imagine." As the years passed, the truth of his words became evident. The Academy's graduates went on to become teachers, business owners, and civic leaders throughout the territory. Many returned to White Oaks, contributing to the town's continued growth and prosperity. Thomas followed in his father's footsteps, developing a passion for ranching and a natural leadership ability that made him Flynn's right hand by the time he reached his teens. Eleanor, with her mother's intellect and her father's determination, became one of the Academy's star pupils, eventually traveling east to attend college, the first woman from White Oaks to do so. Through it all, Flynn and Willow's partnership deepened. The passion of their early days matured into a steadfast devotion that weathered the inevitable challenges of life, drought years that threatened the ranch, periods of illness, the constant demands of their growing enterprises. On their 20th wedding anniversary, the citizens of White Oaks organized a celebration in their honor. The town had changed dramatically from the rough mining camp Willow had first encountered. Now it boasted proper streets, substantial businesses, and a reputation as one of the most progressive communities in the territory. At the celebration, held in the Academy's main hall, the mayor presented them with a leather-bound volume containing letters of appreciation from students, parents, and community members, whose lives they had touched. Later that night, alone in their bedroom, Flynn held Willow close as they reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. "Did you ever imagine this?" he asked. "When you stepped off that stagecoach all those years ago?" Willow shook her head. "I was just hoping to escape scandal and find a quiet place to rebuild my life. And instead, you built something extraordinary." His pride in her was evident in every word. "We built it together," she corrected him, her hand tracing the lines that years of sun and wind had etched into his still handsome face. "Everything good in my life began the day you told that man to speak my name with respect." Flynn smiled at the memory. "I saw something in your eyes that day, a dignity, a strength that all their gossip couldn't touch. I knew then you were someone special. And now look at us," Willow laughed softly. "Pillars of the community, parents of grown children, practically legends if that celebration was anything to judge by. Not bad for a rough cowboy and a scandalized schoolteacher." Flynn kissed her with the same tenderness he had shown on their wedding day. "I'd do it all again in a heartbeat." "As would I," Willow whispered against his lips. "Every moment." In the years that followed, they watched with pride as their children carved their own paths, Thomas taking over more of the ranch operations while courting and eventually marrying the daughter of a neighboring rancher. Eleanor returning from college to teach at the Academy before marrying a young doctor who had recently established a practice in White Oaks. The arrival of grandchildren brought new joy to their lives. Flynn proved to be an indulgent grandfather, teaching the little ones to ride almost as soon as they could walk, while Willow delighted in sharing her love of books and learning with a new generation. As they entered their later years, they gradually stepped back from their daily responsibilities, entrusting the ranch to Thomas and the Academy to a board of directors that included Eleanor. Yet they remained involved, their wisdom and experience continuing to shape the institutions they had built. On warm evenings, they would often sit together on the porch of the ranch house, watching the sunset paint the New Mexico sky in brilliant colors. Sometimes they spoke of the future, of hopes for their grandchildren, of plans for expanding the Academy's scholarship program, of the changing world around them as the territory moved toward statehood. Other times, they simply sat in comfortable silence, Flynn's hand holding Willow's as it had through decades of partnership, the gold of their wedding bands catching the fading light. And sometimes, when the mood was right, Flynn would remind Willow of their beginning of a dusty day in White Oaks when rumors swirled around a young woman brave enough to start anew, and a cowboy who recognized true worth beyond the whispers of shame. "Best decision I ever made," he would say, "standing up for you that day." And Willow would smile, knowing that from that moment of respect had grown a love that had not only transformed their lives but had reached out to touch countless others through the community they had helped to build. "They still tell that story, you know," she told him once, "about how you defended the reputation of a woman you didn't even know." Flynn's eyes twinkled with the same spirit that had first captured her heart. Well, I may not have known you then, Willow Calloway, but I've spent a lifetime learning you since, and I can say with absolute certainty that every day has been a privilege. In a territory built by those brave enough to forge new beginnings, theirs was a love story that had become part of White Oak's legacy, a testament to the power of seeing beyond rumors to the truth of a person's character, and of standing firm in defense of dignity and respect. And in that legacy, the whispers of shame had long since faded away, replaced by a chorus of admiration for all they had built together.